franktalks.com.
Hello, you're listening to the franktalks.com podcast. I'm Frank Kermit. I'll be answering some questions from the internet about relationships for purposes of education. Okay, this question comes in from a woman between the ages of 36 and 40. This is from dearcupid.org. She writes, Dear Frank, my friend Debbie moved an hour and a half away a few years ago, so we don't see each other as often as we used to. Debbie wants me to come and spend a weekend with her, but my husband feels like, why can't I just go and return home the same day? Debbie says that I spoil my husband, and it is ridiculous that I can't leave my husband for a few days. I need your opinions on this. Thanks. Okay, well, let's start off by asking the question, is Debbie married? And if she isn't married, is her attitude about you actually taking your husband's feelings into consideration and calling that spoiling him a factor in why she may not be married? Now, I don't know if she's married or not. I get the impression from this email that she's not married and that she's living alone. I also have some other questions, such as, is Debbie expecting you to go with her to bars and clubs while she's getting picked up? You have to be very mindful of the fact that the simple rule when you are married is you don't put your friends and extended family ahead of your spouse. And if your spouse has any concerns, then you need to be mindful of those concerns. It may not be that he doesn't want you to go away for a couple of days. It might be he's just not comfortable with you going with Debbie for some reason. The fact that she's simply saying, oh, you know what, you're spoiling your husband, you should just be able to go out for a few days, well, that's not taking his feelings into consideration, and I see that as a red flag, and maybe your husband senses that. I don't know if it's necessarily an issue. Have the two of you ever talked about spending time away? One thing you haven't mentioned is, do you have any young children that may need you? In cases like that, going away for a weekend, you have some obligations to your family. The same way, I would tell the same thing to a man. If you have obligations to your family, should you be going away for a weekend? You're only an hour and a half away, so yeah, you would spend 3 hours in commute. But on the other side here, your priority is your family. Whether it's your children or your husband, that's your priority. If it was a man asking me this question, your priority is your wife and your kids, not your buddies. So be mindful of the fact that this could start a repeating behavior pattern that could very well threaten your marriage down the road. You don't mention here if you're in an open relationship or if you're monogamous. I'm assuming, just the way the question is written, I'm going to assume you're probably monogamous. If you're going to be monogamous, you have to behave in a monogamous fashion, and that is, you got to remember to take your partner's feelings into consideration. Not enough information here to really go into, but the general rule is your spouse is the one you're building your future with, so you have to take your spouse's feelings into consideration. You can lose a friend, you can replace a friend, but when you replace a spouse, that's a lot more emotionally damaging than any friend you would have to replace. And the kids involved in any marriage that goes through this kind of trouble, they're the number one priority. And you haven't mentioned anything, so I'm not going to assume either way. But if you do have kids, be mindful of them as well. You can always be frank with me, and I'll always be frank with you. Take care.
If you need help with your relationships, my buddy Frank, he's got some tips. Just go to franktalks.com. His advice is better than your mom's. He knows what you're going through, 'cause Frank has been there too. So log on to franktalks.com.